I asked 2,000 of you how skilled you are at masking or pretending to be neurotypical. 41% said that you're hit and miss. 32% rated yourself as Oscar-worthy but exhausted. Only 7% don't mask, but here is the terrifying truth about these numbers. Hey friends, I'm Mike, a late identified autistic adult. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to revisit the subject of masking. But before anyone leaps to their keyboards to say, but everyone masks, I'm not talking about first impressions or first dates for that matter. I'm not talking about politeness and the little social dances. Sure, everyone does some level of image crafting, the kind of small adjustments like polite smiles or holding in a fart. But what autistic people experience is fundamentally different in both degree and kind. The constant, exhausting hypervigilance required isn't an occasional impression management. It's a survival strategy that so very many of us employ from childhood, just to try and avoid rejection or bullying or worse. And I know I said avoid, but honestly, I don't think I avoided that much. I don't think I was all that stealthy. How about you? I mean, I did try my best to blend in, as many of us do. In fact, a lot of autistic people become extremely adept at this social camouflaging. We study how others behave, and we try and copy it. Think about it. Forcing yourself to make eye contact even when it feels uncomfortable, rehearsing your small talk so that you sound a bit more normal, suppressing your natural stims because you know it might appear like weird to someone. We basically end up building a whole social costume for ourselves, and often this starts so young we don't even realise that we're doing it as adults. You get told, don't do that, it looks odd. If you get told that enough times as a child, you will get the hint eventually. Some of us even consciously imitated the popular kids at school, like little undercover anthropologists, and I definitely did a lot of that. Trying to crack the code of how to fit in. It's pretty much impression management overdrive. All day, every day. But here's the kicker. No matter how convincing your act is, it is still an act, and it's still exhausting, and we will talk more about that toll in a minute. So my YouTube poll then, it was just for fun, but actually there is something in here worth exploring. And you know how in the United States the DSM-5 lists autism support needs on a linear spectrum from level 1 to level 3, where 1 is low support needs and 3 is high support needs. Well, the DSM-5's level 1, 2, 3 scale was originally designed for insurance paperwork, and online, unfortunately, it's mutated into this misleading idea of high versus low functioning. So instead of that tired little one-dimensional spectrum, let's swap it for a masking tier list that might actually predict risk. The top tier, I've called it, this is the high masking. It's the cursed chameleons, are those who blend in so well that you've practically lost your true self. You aren't sure who you might have been if you didn't mask your traits so intensely. About 19% of you, which is roughly 1 in 5, said that you feel like this. And we'll come back to why I've called it cursed in a bit. But under the cursed chameleon tier is the Oscar-worthy performance tier, where about a third of you self-reported that you fit. A bit like an actor like Anthony Hopkins or Bella Ramsey, the way they would just disappear into a role. You're playing a character convincingly, but you're exhausted every day from it. And below that is the hit and miss tier. Sometimes you feel like you pass as a neurotypical. Other times the mask slips and you catch yourself accidentally stimming in public. Oh, the shame. Sarcasm, of course. And 41% of you related to the hit or miss category. Finally, 7% of you said you either stopped masking or never masked at all. Okay, so end of video. We've defined the tiers, done the poll. not so fast. There's a paradox hidden beneath these tiers. Higher masking doesn't equate to lower support needs. In other words, just because someone can act like they need less help, that doesn't mean that they actually do. Think of a Venn diagram of autistic people with the highest support needs. For example, those with co-occurring intellectual disabilities who might live in full-time supported residential care. Yes, that particular cohort does have very high support needs in daily life. Their safety and survival depend on significant support. And often, that group isn't masking their autism at all, and their traits are more visibly apparent. But here's the philosophical problem. We can't simply split the autistic population into two buckets and say you're either unable to mask and therefore have it really hard, or that you're able to mask and therefore have it easy. Life isn't that tidy. We cannot say that those who can camouflage, either a bit or a lot, automatically have it better. Being able to hide your autism doesn't magically erase the challenges that come with it. In fact, if you are one of the high maskers, however you define that, you are at high risk of being misdiagnosed or completely missed by clinicians. Or worse. For a lot of people, it's a whole saga of misdiagnoses before landing on autism, if they get the autism identification at all. You show up to doctors or therapists with anxiety, depression, maybe ADHD-like symptoms, and that's exactly what gets diagnosed, everything except the autism, because you seem too normal in how you present. They might see the stress, but not the underlying reason for it. A really common mislabel, especially for autistic women, girls, genderqueer people, is borderline personality disorder, or BPD. What's worse than not having an appropriate diagnosis or validated autistic identity, being diagnosed with something that you don't have because you're masking too well? How's that for #fake disorder cringe? Now, it is possible to have autism and BPD concurrently, but as this page on BPD and autism from Neurodivergent Insights explains, borderline personality disorder is a common misdiagnosis for autistic women and genderqueer people. Complicating matters, BPD and autism also co-occur at high rates, and an autistic person is more vulnerable to developing BPD. So a person may have both autism and BPD. When the underlying autism is missed, BPD symptoms are likely exacerbated. Unfortunately, many clinicians are not considering autism when assessing for BPD. It is important autism is always ruled out or on the differential list when assessing for BPD. Think about it. A high-masking autistic person may present to therapy saying, "I don't know who I am, I just become what others expect." And that does sound a lot like the identity disturbance criterion in BPD. They might have extreme meltdowns or shutdowns from sensory overload or social stress, which a clinician who doesn't see the sensory piece might misinterpret as the emotional dysregulation typical of BPD. The truth is, the person might not have BPD at all. Their challenges stem from autism, plus the trauma of masking and years of not getting their true needs met. But if no one catches that, they might carry that incorrect label for years. They might be getting treatments that don't really help, or worse, feel blamed for having a personality disorder when in reality they needed autism-informed support and understanding. I'm not going to keep going on about BPD right now, but it's just one example. Many high-masking autistics, especially those of us who flew under the radar in childhood, get tagged with a whole shopping list, a whole smorgasbord, did I say that right? of other diagnoses, but not autism. Social anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety, depression, bipolar. Oh, maybe it's just ADHD. Meanwhile, the real thread tying it all together is often autism, and that remains hidden behind the mask. It's an awful catch-22. You mask to avoid stigma and to cope, but masking too well means that you don't get the very support and validation that would make masking less necessary in the first place. So what happens when a chameleon's colours finally fade? You get an Oscar-level performance that's now running on fumes, and sooner or later, the fumes can run out. Oscar-worthy dangers include the most obvious one, burnout. And that's the big red flag for this tier, running at a chronic level of energy output far exceeding your ability to cope. Burnout is maybe the most dramatic outcome of long-term masking, but it's far from the only one. Researchers found that constantly camouflaging your autism is associated with some pretty dire mental health struggles. We're talking sky-high anxiety, depression, and even a kind of hollow feeling of losing yourself. And it does make sense. You can only push down your true self for so long before cracks start to show and the stresses pile up. Neurotypical people can burn out too. Ask anyone stuck working long hours in a job that they hate. But autistic people are at a higher risk of burnout and exhaustion compared to non-autistic or allistic people, especially if we're masking day in and day out. That chronic stress is like a slow poison. Camouflaging and unmet support needs appear to be risk markers for suicidality unique to autism, says a 2018 study titled Risk Markers for Suicidality in Autistic Adults. It was published in the journal Molecular Autism back in 2018. One of its authors, Simon Baron-Cohen of the University of Cambridge, later highlighted in a different 2022 study that suicide rates are unacceptably high in autistic people, and suicide prevention has to be the #1 goal to reduce the worrying increased mortality in autistic people. And worryingly, that newer research from the University of Nottingham looked specifically at people who were likely autistic but undiagnosed. There are folks who didn't even know they were autistic, yet were masking and struggling, often without support. So although autism itself is not a mental illness, it's a neurotype, the way that your brain is wired, forcing an autistic brain into a neurotypical sized box causes significant stress that can lead to trauma and suicidal ideation at incredibly high rates compared to the general population. Basically, if you treat a neurotype like it's something to fix or hide, you can end up with some serious mental health crises. Masking is a huge predictor of these negative outcomes. So if you'd like to do me a favour, maybe we can start looking at how much an autistic person feels forced to mask. That is a risk factor for mental health, right up there with other stressors. In other words, instead of society focusing on some misleading functioning level, maybe we should pay attention to a person's masking level, because a high masking autistic who appears fine can be in far more danger than anyone realises. It's not as simple as saying high masking is shorthand for low support needs, so therefore you're fine and you're not like my 5-year-old non-speaking nephew. If you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, we're all different, but if we insist on reducing everything down to a single linear spectrum somewhere along the way, I would argue that the degree to which someone feels they must constantly mask is a more useful metric than the old level 1, 2, 3 or the high or low functioning labels. High masking often means high unmet support needs. I'd like to think of the Oscar-worthy tier this way. You might be a great actor, but you're working within a terrible contract and no union. The pay is crap in terms of what it gives you back, and there's no time off. Do you know what I mean? This is the very unsustainable tier. The hit and miss tier is the inconsistent one. This was my default state for most of my life up until my mid-20s. After that, I graduated to Oscar-worthy, and depending on the context, I've occasionally dabbled in cursed chameleon territory. Hit and miss means sometimes you pass as neurotypical and other times your autism shows despite your best efforts. We're talking inconsistent support and often delayed diagnosis. If you're late identified, you might well have spent years in this tier. I would call it a clue. In fact, the DSM-5 criteria for autism even acknowledges that many adults manage to camouflage their traits, which is one reason that many of us got missed. The National Autistic Society's explanation of masking is on point. They say, especially for people who discover their autistic identity later in life, it's common to have masked unconsciously for many years, meaning it can be difficult for those people to know what kind of a person that they would have been and what interests and characteristics they would have allowed themselves to develop if they hadn't suppressed their autistic traits and natural instincts throughout their life. Basically, if you've been shapeshifting to seem normal for decades, it might be hard to untangle who you really are from the person that you've been pretending to be. What kind of person would you have been if you hadn't felt the need to push your real self down? It's a really heavy question, I know, and a common experience for late diagnosed autistics. Masking often helped us to survive at the time, yes, but mere survival, I think, it's not truly living. There is a cruel irony here. If people assume that you're fine, you get no support. And if you did have any support to begin with, it might evaporate because now you seem like you're coping. It's the classic, you're doing too well problem. Perform competency, and any help that you were getting, gone. Poof. For instance, an autistic student who holds it together in class might lose the accommodations that they had because the teachers now say, oh, well, you're doing so well now. Meanwhile, that student is having nightly meltdowns at home from the strain. Ask me how I might know this. It's an awful catch-22. And to be fair to clinicians and teachers, I do get it. Years of camouflaging can be very confusing for them to unravel. As staff, right? As teachers. A lifetime of hit and miss behaviour from the students might look from the outside like nothing serious is going on. They're just a bit quirky or moody or hormonal or whatever. So they don't realise that underneath the mask is someone struggling. Masking helped many of us to survive, but it comes at a huge cost. Remember, survival is not the same as thriving, whether you're a chameleon blending into the wallpaper or a no-mask legend stim dancing in Tesco. Your worth is not measured by how well you impersonate neurotypicals. You don't get a prize for best actor in a neurotypical role. If anything, the prize you get is burnout, identity crisis, and a bunch of unnecessary suffering. Congratulations. Beyond those, we also risk just a grab bag, I guess, of physical and mental health issues, chronic insomnia, panic attacks, intense anxiety, migraines, the so-called GI problems, right? The body, as they say, definitely keeps score of all of that stress. There are well understood physical symptoms that can crop up from constantly pushing ourselves to operate at an energy level far above what we can sustain. Oh, and here's something really important. Masking can seriously delay the recognition of autism, which then robs people of years during which they could have been supported and understood. If you're someone who was told, nah, you can't be autistic because you make eye contact or have a family or seem too normal, you know exactly what I mean. Like, you could avoid eye contact your whole life, but manage it for 2 seconds in a doctor's office and then hear, well, you made eye contact just now, so you can't possibly be autistic. It's absurd. It happens all the time, though. And if you're a professional or a friend listening, remember that many autistic people are hiding in plain sight all around you. Don't let a well-performed mask fool you into thinking someone isn't struggling or must not be that autistic. As the saying goes, not all disabilities are visible, and in this case, not all autistic traits are visible, especially if someone has become a world-class camouflager, even only for brief moments when it counts. Masking level 0. I guess this would be the unicorn scenario. An autistic person who does not mask at all. Fully authentic, 100% of the time. These folks are rare, largely because the world doesn't usually allow a level 7... level 7? A level 0 mask. The world doesn't usually allow a level 0 mask without some consequences. A level 0 masker's autism is plain to see to everyone. If they have support needs, those needs are far more likely to be acknowledged because they're visible. This might be the kid flapping in class or the adult who'll info dump for 2 hours straight and not notice the listener's boredom. In some ways, they might actually get more immediate support or at least more understanding from people who recognise, okay, that one's clearly autistic. But on the flip side, they almost certainly face more direct stigma or even alienation for showing their autism openly. Society isn't kind to obvious difference, unfortunately. I'd like to think that the 7% of you who don't mask are doing so intentionally, like you've made the conscious choice to be authentic, and to hell with the consequences. I'd hope that you are pioneering a better future in that way for all autistic people. My hot take is that when people show up as their authentic selves, they help create space, a bubble around them where other people feel a bit safer to do the same. If you're bravely autistic in a world that pressures you to conform, you're not only helping yourself to live more fully, you're also signalling to others that it's okay to be different. You're basically an autism trailblazer. On the other hand, I have a video literally titled "Don't Stop Masking." I mean it, and I know, ironic clickbait sounding title, hear me out. Sometimes the most practical or safe thing to do is to mask a little bit. In reality, culture punishes difference, doesn't it? We don't live in a utopia where everyone's quirks are accepted, so I'm never going to tell you to drop your mask in every situation no matter what. That would be naive and possibly dangerous. Instead, I advocate being intentional about it. If you find that in certain environments or with certain people you can unmask a bit, and as a result your anxiety decreases, your energy returns and your sense of identity solidifies, versus the opposite of those things and fading away, that is absolutely the goal to strive for in life. Some strategic masking isn't self-betrayal, it's just practical. Putting on a formal jacket for a funeral or job interview doesn't erase your comfy t-shirt and hoodied soul inside, if you know what I mean. Adapting to a situation doesn't automatically equal living a lie, as long as you are choosing your battles and are intentional about what you're doing. The key is to make sure that you're in control of your masked behaviours rather than wearing it because you're ashamed of who you are. Choose your battles. Be intentional. For those of you that enjoy a bit of personal development alongside your autism content, a bit of self-help, why not share in the comments one thing that you'll stop masking this week? Maybe it's allowing yourself to stim to your favourite song, or admitting to your friends that you really do hate social clubs and would prefer a game night. Big or small, it counts, and I'd love to hear it. I know my tier list is a bit of tongue-in-cheek, right? You can't actually tell if someone is autistic or not just by looking at them, or even by how normal, quotes, they may act in a given moment. But the broader point that I want to drive home is, don't judge an autistic person's needs by how well they seem to be coping on the surface. When someone is high masking, it does not equal low support needs. More often, it means they have a lot of unmet support needs that you're just not seeing. And if someone is able to drop the mask and start thriving, it's not because they weren't that autistic after all, or just a phase. It could be because their environment finally allowed them to be themselves. I actually made a video called "Why Autism Isn't the Problem," because to me, it's entirely context dependent. Environment is everything. I don't personally have a fixed autism level number to give you in my diagnostic paperwork. I joke that I've kind of completed all the levels in my teens and now I'm into the endgame DLC, but seriously, the effort I need to put into masking depends entirely on where I am and who I'm around. For example, if I were to be reassessed in American freedom units and given an American Psychiatric Association support level from 1 to 3, a one-syllable way to describe somebody's entire support needs structure, in one syllable. The number would probably be level 1 right now, as in this moment right now here, because I'm in my studio on my own with my cats and plushies around. I'm talking to a camera lens. I'm wearing comfortable clothes. I'm well rested. I'm hydrated. I'm on my own schedule. In this environment, I basically need no extra support from anyone, and I'm hardly masking at all. But drop me into a group home environment with unpredictable people, lots of noise, shouting, smells, chaotic expectations, then I'd probably look like a level 2. And if I were locked away in a really restrictive, hostile place, think an old school institution or something equally awful, I might appear to be level 3. And the same person, wildly different level depending on the context. The point is, those formal support labels by themselves aren't very useful, because everything depends on context and environment. High masking, which is, I'm going to call it masking level 3, strongly implies that a person has unmet support needs that we might not be acknowledging. The higher the masking tier, theoretically, the higher the risk of negative outcomes if those needs continue to go unmet. This tier list that I'm using isn't even limited to people with an official autism diagnosis. These patterns show up in self-diagnosed or as yet undiagnosed folks who have autistic traits too. In fact, some of the research on suicidality and camouflaging includes people who weren't formally diagnosed yet clearly had much of the same autistic experience. That means that there are a lot of people out there masking and suffering in silence who have had no idea about what was going on. They just know that pretending to be like everyone else is slowly destroying them. And if you're curious about how psychologists actually measure masking, there is an assessment which you can do called the CAT-Q, which is the Camouflaging Autistic Traits Questionnaire. I took it myself and shared the results in a YouTube video a while back. Talk about oversharing, I know. And I'll link that in the description if you'd like to see how I scored and what the test involves. It's basically a questionnaire that gives you a camouflaging score broken into different subtypes. It's all explained in the video in the description. So what does it mean to unmask? Well, first of all, unmasking doesn't mean you fling off the mask in every scenario, consequences be damned. It's about finding safe spaces and people where you can be authentic and building more of your life around those people and places while reducing the time spent in environments that force you to camouflage. It can start small. Maybe you info dump about your special interest on an online forum and feel the sweet relief of not holding back. And maybe you create a little oasis in the corner of your room, a space that's 100% yours, where you can stim, flap, rock, or relax without anyone judging. Maybe you decide to stim openly at home instead of concealing it, or allow yourself to wear the noise-cancelling headphones at the grocery store, even if you used to feel self-conscious about it before. Each act of unmasking is both liberating and a little scary, because we are so used to hiding. You might also test the waters with a trusted friend. You could say, hey, I just wanted to tell you that I am autistic, and when we hang out, would it be okay if sometimes I step outside for a bit? Crowds can overwhelm me. A good friend will likely say, of course, do whatever you need. What do you need from me? And boom. There you go. You've just created a little bit of space where you can be more yourself. It's about gradually expanding these zones in your life where the mask isn't needed. Remember the book Unmasking Autism by Dr. Devon Price? It emphasises that unmasking is not about losing all of your social skills or never adapting ever again. It's about shedding the shame. It's about giving yourself permission to meet your own needs without apology. Price and other neurodivergent advocates do suggest steps like connecting with the autistic community, because there's nothing like realising you're not alone. Maybe that other people also secretly hate phone calls, or also love swinging on a playground swing as an adult, or chewing chewy stim toys at their desk. Setting boundaries, like saying no to events that you know will push you into burnout, or telling people when you're at capacity, or challenging your internalized ableism and reminding yourself that there's nothing wrong or broken about being autistic, even if you have to live in a world that doesn't always get you. These are the building blocks of a more authentic life. And trust me, the payoff can be huge. When you stop pouring so much energy into acting, you get to redirect that energy into actually living. Many people find their anxiety goes down once they start unmasking in safe spaces. It's such a relief to not constantly second guess yourself. Some people will notice their depression lifting a little bit, or their confidence growing because they finally feel accepted as themselves. I've heard someone describe their unmasking journey as life going from black and white to full colour. It's as though you were holding your breath underwater and suddenly you come up for air. Again, ask me how I know. Personally, I know that whenever I've been able to drop the mask even a little, it's as though I can breathe easier and my brain suddenly has room to think about things that I actually enjoy, rather than monitoring my every move. Like, unmasking isn't just, the onus shouldn't just be on the autistic person, it should also be on the environment, the workplaces, the schools, the public spaces. Like, every time an employer says, sure, you can wear your headphones if it helps, or a teacher who lets a kid stim with a fidget toy, these things are little wins that make unmasking just that little bit more feasible. The more of us who are openly autistic and advocating, the more society will, hopefully, get the message that autism isn't really the problem that they think it is. A lack of understanding is. Imagine a world where no autistic person feels they have to hide just to survive. We're not there yet. But with each honest conversation and each small act of acceptance, we inch a little closer to that goal. So whether you are a masking level 3 master of disguise or a proud masking level 0 free spirit, remember, your value isn't measured by how well you fit into a neurotypical mold. If your mask is starting to itch and crack, it's okay to take it off, even for a short while in a safe place, if you even know how. I've given some examples earlier in the video. In fact, it might save your sanity all your life. And if you love or support an autistic person, encourage them to be themselves. Make it clear that you're a safe person for them. You're not going to be judgmental and weird. That's it. That's kind of all autistic people really need for people around them. Because beneath that carefully crafted persona is a whole human being who deserves to be seen and supported. You know? Am I just like repeating myself too much? You guys need to let me know. It's hard to read the room when I'm talking in my own room and I'm the only person in it. On a happier note, last week I uploaded an hour-long celebration of autistic passions. Specifically, mine. It was my 100th long-form video on this channel, and I'm really happy with how the video turned out. If you like cats, or the ocean, or cats, or Taylor Swift, or cats, give it a watch next. It's got some never before seen B-roll. Enjoy, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!